What's up, everybody? Here I am with another impromptu video. I'm making this one because I sort of lost a bit of momentum for a while, and so I decided I wanted to make something that was special and important to me, and there's not going to be a lot of B-roll in here. It's just going to be me giving my opinions on a particular thing that happened recently, and I'm doing this because I was giving myself an excuse not to make another video, and so here I am, just unscripted, raw, giving you my thoughts. And this video is going to be about a topic that literally none of you have asked me to talk about. Giving you my thoughts on the new 992 GT3 release. I know I'm a little bit late to the party. We've already covered why I'm late to the party. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all of the specs that everybody's been iterating on their videos. Everyone's talking about the same things. It's lap times, it's power, and all this stuff. I'm going to talk to you about the three things about the design that speak to me specifically, and then three important reasons why I believe that the GT3 is probably one of the most, if not the most important car coming out today. All right, so let's start real quick with the three things about the design that stood out to me. And the thing is, these things stood out to me because initially I didn't like them, and then they kind of grew on me. The first, let's go from the front to the back. The first is the big black front lip. Now, that is meant to increase a significant amount of brake cooling to the front brakes. And initially, I felt a little bit weird that it was just this black space, especially compared to the 991 where that whole area is designed. But once I started to realize the functionality of it, and I started to look at it a little bit more at a whole, it really started to grow on me. So I'm really fascinated by that. The second thing is in the interior, the gear lever. Now, with the 992, I was actually a huge fan of the new design that they made on that small electronic gear lever. That was actually the first thing that stood out to me and the first thing that I fell in love with when I saw the 992, because I'm not really a fan of the 991 interior. I know that's a minority, but it is what it is. The issue that I actually had with the gear lever I talked about in previous videos were basically, if you go into drive, you have to go into manual mode, and if you go out of drive, it takes it out of manual mode, and you have to push the button to... It's really annoying. I've talked about it in previous videos. Take a look. What they did in the GT3 is they replaced that with an actual sequential gear lever that looks like a manual gear lever. The thing that's good about that, aside from it actually looking really good, is the fact that it takes the traditional swift movement of going to drive and over to manual. That's a big deal for me ergonomically, because you don't have to go into drive, press manual, go into reverse, then go back into drive, press manual. It's just one smooth motion. That's why it works better. I thought it was a little bit tacky that they made it look just like a manual gear lever. I think they could have made it look a little bit different, but that was my initial feeling, and I don't really think that at all now. And the third thing is the swan neck spoiler, which a lot of people are talking about. I love the way that thing looks. Initially, when I saw it, I thought the swan neck was a little bit overkill, but again, when I realized the functionality of it, that changed my opinion significantly. The thing is, I started falling in love with the GT3 because of the RS model, and the wing on the RS, the 991 at least, looks amazing. The 992, I really liked what they did with it. I think it looks way better than the 991 GT3 wing. I'm interested to see what they do with the RS. All right, so now on to the three important points about this car that I believe make this probably the most important car out. And the thing I did with this was deliberately, I went on a media blackout. I haven't watched any reviews of this or anything like that. I just watched the live stream, and that's it. The first point about this car that's so significant is the fact that I forgot what my points were. The first point, the fact that the GT3 stuck with a 7-speed PDK or a 6-speed manual, indicates where Porsche's focus is on this particular car. One of the things that they did was they didn't really bump the power that much from the previous GT3, yet it's doing a sub 7-minute lap time on the Nürburgring, faster than not only the old GT3, not the old GT3 RS, but their $1 million 918 hybrid hypercar. It outlapped that on the Nürburgring. How did it do it? Weight saving, aerodynamics, and improved suspension. It barely did anything to the power. And a lot of companies right now really ought to learn from that, because everyone's just adding numbers, add another gear, add more power, add more wheel drive. They decided to take the car and mold it around the power that it already has, which is more than enough, and crank out a significant increase in speed and decrease in lap time. And that leads me to point number 2, which is the fact that the car is not turbocharged. Now, this is something that I feel like a lot of people were afraid of, but knew that Porsche wouldn't ruin the GT3 engine. Well, I shouldn't say ruin, wouldn't turbocharge the GT3 engine. And this is linked to point number 1 because aside from the fact that they didn't feel a need to increase the power, by improving the dynamics of the car on the same power output, by definition, they're making it more efficient in both power and in terms of consumption. So that falls in line with what Porsche has been talking about all this time. And again, it points to where they see the importance, right? The importance is ultimately the performance and the driver experience, not just cranking out more horses. And this leads me to the third and final point as to what makes the GT3 the most important car, in my opinion, out or coming out in the current times. And that is my opinion that Porsche, either purposely or inadvertently, showed that the GT3 is what really matters for purity. And they did everything in their company to save the GT3, not just the 911, but specifically the GT3. Now let me explain my thinking on that. We know that the non-turbo 911s, aside from the GT3, have been turbocharged, and that kind of bothered a lot of people. To be honest, it didn't really affect the dynamics of the car, made it more efficient, and they're also making room to hybridize that as well. I also think back to when the Cayenne first came out, and I remember thinking to myself, that seems a little bit like a cheap shot. Like, why is this company that's known for the 911 making an SUV? It feels like they're sort of soiling the brand. It's whatever. People have thought things like that about a lot of different companies. But there's two things that Porsche is doing. Number one, they're going half electric on their half their fleet's going to be electric. And they're doing the synthetic fuel thing, right? So by making a large enough fleet, in my opinion, they made enough room to make half their cars electric. If they didn't have those other cars, then the electric stuff would have to come to the more important cars, the more purebred cars. By having a fleet for the people who just want the badge and don't care about the purebredness of the performance, they have the room to just make that all electric. Sure, whatever, fine. And then they managed to very tastefully add turbochargers to the Carreras and the Targas, which, to be honest, are not really the purebred sports car because the people buying it are not getting a pure track car. Those are the people getting the GT3. So by doing all of that, by sacrificing the normally aspirated engine in the pure the base 911, they managed to make a large enough decrease in their carbon footprint to make room for the GT3. I feel like they did everything in their power to make room for the GT3. You can't ignore the steps that they're taking to potentially single-handedly save the entire motoring industry from itself. Whether you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below. Share this with other people who you think might share the view or who need to come over to this side of the viewpoint. Thanks for being here.